In 1916, Germany was choking. No cotton crossed the British blockade. Uniforms were rotting off soldiers' backs. The textile mills of Bavaria stood silent. And then someone remembered. Deep in military archives, researchers found reports from Scandinavian villages where women were still weaving fabric from the same plant their grandmothers had cursed in the garden. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica, the weed you pull with gloves. Within 18 months, German factories were processing 2.7 million kilograms of nettle fiber. Soldiers wore it, civilians wore it. The fabric was stronger than the cotton it replaced. Then the war ended, and with it, the memory. This is not a story about a forgotten plant. This is a story about a fiber that clothed Europe for 3,000 years before cotton existed on the continent. A textile that requires no pesticides, no irrigation, no fertilizer. A material that grows on land too poor for any other crop. And yet, if you walk into a textile factory today and ask about nettle, they will look at you like you are insane. In 1991, two German hikers found a body in the Ötztal Alps. The man had been frozen for 5,300 years. His name is now Ötzi. And when archaeologists examined his clothing, they found something that rewrote textile history. His undergarment was not made from animal skin. It was woven fabric, plant fiber. And when they analyzed the microscopic structure under electron microscopy, they confirmed it: nettle. A man from 3,300 BC was wearing nettle cloth. This was not an isolated case. In 1929, archaeologists excavating Bronze Age burial mounds in Denmark found textile fragments at Voldtofte that dated to 800 BC. The fabric was so finely woven that it resembled linen. Analysis confirmed nettle fiber. At Lusehøj, another Danish site from the Bronze Age, they found fishing nets made entirely from nettle cordage. The twist angle and fiber diameter indicated processing techniques identical to what Scandinavian women would use 3,000 years later. In 2003, Cambridge University's McDonald Institute published a comprehensive analysis of Neolithic textiles from across Northern Europe. The report, led by Dr. Elizabeth Barber, concluded that nettle was the dominant bast fiber in European textile production until the arrival of flax cultivation around 5000 BC, and remained the primary fiber for lower-class textiles well into the medieval period. Nettle cloth was everywhere. Not because people loved getting stung, because nettle fiber has a tensile strength 25% higher than cotton and comparable to linen. Because the plant grows in ditches, on roadsides, in the nitrogen-rich soil near human settlements. Because you do not need to irrigate it, spray it, or fertilize it. You just cut it and weave it. In 77 AD, Pliny the Elder wrote Naturalis Historia, his encyclopedia of the known world. In Book 19, he describes the textiles of the empire: silk from China, linen from Egypt, wool from Spain. And then, with barely concealed disgust, he mentions Urtica, the nettle, as the fabric of Germania and the barbarian territories to the north. He did not elaborate, because Romans did not wear nettle. Romans wore toga woven from fine wool or imported linen. Nettle was what the Gauls wore, what the Saxons wore, what the people beyond civilization wore. This contempt lasted 800 years. But in the medieval period, reality forced a revision. Flax cultivation requires good farmland. Good farmland grows wheat. And when population exploded in the 11th and 12th centuries, every acre mattered. Textile production shifted to nettle because nettle grows on marginal land that feeds no one. In 1388, an inventory from the monastery of Rupertsberg in the Rhineland lists 30 ells of nettle cloth for the undergarments of novices. The cloth was cheaper than linen and lasted longer than wool in contact with skin. By the 15th century, nettle was so common in peasant households that the German word for nettle cloth, Nesselstoff, became synonymous with undergarments. In Scotland, nettle fiber was standard for fishing nets and sacking until the 1700s. An agricultural report from Aberdeenshire in 1794 notes that the common people make yarn from nettles, which they weave into a coarse cloth used for bedsheets and shirting. And then came the slave ships. In 1764, James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny in Lancashire. The machine could spin 8 threads at once, then 16, then 80. It was designed for one fiber, cotton. Cotton grown in the Caribbean, cotton picked by enslaved Africans, cotton shipped to Liverpool, cotton so cheap that it bankrupted the hand spinners of India and the flax weavers of Ireland and the nettle processors of Germany. By 1800, Britain was importing 56 million pounds of raw cotton annually. Factories in Manchester, Sheffield, and Glasgow ran 24 hours a day. Cotton flooded the market at prices no local fiber could match. But this had nothing to do with quality. In 1810, a Prussian military report compared nettle cloth to cotton for durability. After 500 hours of abrasion testing, cotton fabric showed 40% fiber loss, nettle showed 18%. The report concluded that nettle was superior for military applications where longevity is essential. No one cared. Cotton was cheap. Cotton was industrial. Cotton had the infrastructure of empire behind it. And nettle had widows in Scandinavian villages who knew how to ret the stalks in cold water and comb out the fiber by hand. You cannot compete with that. By 1850, nettle textile production in Western Europe had collapsed. The few remaining processors were elderly women in remote Norwegian valleys who had learned from their grandmothers. In 1887, a Norwegian ethnographic survey found only 12 women in the entire country who still knew the full process of nettle cloth production. 12 women, holding 3,000 years of knowledge. On August 4, 1914, Britain declared a naval blockade of Germany. No cotton in, no wool in. By 1916, Germany was facing a textile crisis. Soldiers needed uniforms, factories needed industrial fabric, civilians needed clothing. The Reichsbekleidungsstelle, the Imperial Clothing Office, issued an urgent directive: find alternative fibers. Researchers revisited old texts. They interviewed elderly women in Bavaria and Saxony, and they rediscovered nettle. In 1917, the German government issued contracts to over 1,300 collection centers across the country. Villages were required to harvest nettle stalks by the ton. Children were sent into ditches with gloves and shears. The stalks were bundled, retting in ponds, and sent to processing factories in Silesia and Westphalia. By 1918, Germany was producing 2.7 million kilograms of nettle fiber annually. The fabric was not soft. It was coarse and greenish and smelled faintly of plant decay, but it was durable. A 1918 German military report noted that nettle blend uniforms outlasted cotton equivalents by a factor of 1.8 in field conditions. But the war ended, the blockade lifted, cotton returned. And the nettle infrastructure, the processing plants, the machinery, the expertise was dismantled. By 1925, nettle textile production in Germany had ceased entirely. The knowledge nearly died again. And it would have stayed dead if scientists had not started asking a simple question. Why did nettle work so well? Because here's what cotton cannot do. Cotton requires 10,000 to 17,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of fiber. Nettle requires rainfall, no irrigation. Cotton depletes soil nitrogen. Nettle enriches it. The plant's root system fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere, adding 20 to 40 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare to the soil annually, equivalent to moderate fertilizer application. Cotton is attacked by the boll weevil, the bollworm, aphids, whiteflies, and at least 40 other insect pests. Nettle is defended by trichomes, hollow silica-tipped needles that inject a mixture of histamine, acetylcholine, serotonin, and formic acid into anything that touches it. No insect eats nettle on purpose. And the fiber itself is extraordinary. Nettle fiber is a bast fiber like linen. It comes from the phloem tissue in the plant's stem, the vascular system that transports nutrients. Under scanning electron microscopy, nettle fiber shows a complex microstructure, a cellulose core surrounded by hemicellulose and lignin, with a polygonal cross-section that gives it high tensile strength. In 2002, researchers at the Technical University of Dresden compared the mechanical properties of nettle fiber to cotton and flax. Their findings, published in Textile Research Journal. Tensile strength: nettle equals 1600 megapascals. Cotton equals 400 megapascals. Flax equals 1500 megapascals. Fiber length: nettle equals 40 to 70 millimeters. Cotton equals 25 to 35 millimeters. Longer fibers means stronger yarn. Moisture absorption: nettle equals 12%. Cotton equals 8%. Better for skin comfort and dye retention. The study concluded that nettle fiber exceeds cotton in all mechanical properties relevant to textile applications. But there was a problem. Cotton can be processed with machines designed in the 1800s. Every textile factory on Earth is built for cotton. The fiber diameter, the crimp, the staple length, cotton fits the infrastructure. Nettle does not. Nettle fiber is longer and stiffer. It requires different retting times, different combing machinery, different spinning tensions. To process nettle at industry scale, you need to redesign the entire production system. And in the year 2000, no one wanted to do that. Cotton was cheap, cotton was easy, cotton was backed by subsidies, trade agreements, and 200 years of established infrastructure. So why nettle is not in your t-shirt? Cotton fiber is 12 to 30 millimeters long. Nettle fiber is 40 to 70 millimeters long. Every machine in a textile mill, the carding machines, the spinning frames, the looms, is calibrated for cotton-length fibers. When you try to process nettle fiber with cotton machinery, it jams. The fiber wraps around the rollers. The combing teeth break. The tension is wrong. To fix this, you need to do one of two things: redesign every machine in the factory, cost $15 to $30 million per facility, or modify the fiber to match the existing machinery. In 2010, a research team at the Fraunhofer Institute for Applied Polymer Research in Potsdam chose option 2. They developed a process called cottonization. Using mechanical and enzymatic treatments, they broke down long nettle fibers into shorter segments that mimic cotton's staple length. The process uses a cellulase enzyme isolated from Trichoderma ricci, a fungus that naturally decomposes plant cellulose. The enzyme does not destroy the fiber, it weakens the bonds between fiber bundles, allowing mechanical action to separate them into cotton-length segments without losing tensile strength. The result? Nettle fiber that can be processed on standard cotton machinery. In 2013, the Fraunhofer team published their findings in Industrial Crops and Products. They reported successful production of cottonized nettle fiber with mechanical properties equivalent to cotton and compatible with existing textile infrastructure. The cost? €5 per kilogram. Still higher than cotton, but no longer prohibitive. And then, the water crisis hit. In 2015, the Aral Sea in Central Asia disappeared. Not dried up, disappeared. What was once the fourth largest lake on Earth became a desert of salt and ship graveyards. The cause, Soviet-era irrigation for cotton. Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan had been diverting the Amu Darya and Sirdarya rivers to flood cotton fields since the 1960s. By 2015, those rivers no longer reached the Aral Sea. 50,000 square kilometers of water, gone. The same year, researchers at the Stockholm Environment Institute published a report on the global water cost of cotton. Their findings: cotton accounts for 2.6% of global agricultural land, but consumes 24% of global agricultural irrigation. One cotton t-shirt requires 2,700 liters of water to produce. In water-stressed regions like India, Pakistan, and Uzbekistan, cotton cultivation is draining aquifers at unsustainable rates. The fashion industry began looking for alternatives. bamboo fabric, recycled polyester, hemp, and suddenly, nettle. In 2017, a sustainable fashion consortium in the Netherlands funded a pilot program to cultivate nettle on 200 hectares of marginal farmland near Groningen. The project, called Nettle Green, aimed to produce 50 tons of nettle fiber annually using cottonization processing. The results, published in 2019, water use 180 liters per kilogram of fiber versus 10,000 for cotton. Pesticide use 0. Fertilizer use, 0. Carbon sequestration, nettle fields absorbed 3.2 tons of CO2 per hectare annually due to root biomass and soil enrichment. The fabric was indistinguishable from cotton-linen blends. By 2020, the European Union had funded 4.5 million euros in nettle textile research under the Horizon 2020 program. The goal: establish commercial-scale nettle production by 2025. But the breakthrough did not come from Europe. It came from Nepal. In 2018, a textile cooperative in the Dading district of Nepal began experimenting with Gerardia diversifolia, Himalayan giant nettle. This was not the European nettle. This species grows to 4 meters in height in the foothills of the Himalayas. The fiber is longer, stronger, and has been used by indigenous communities in Nepal for centuries to make ropes, fishing nets, and traditional cloth called alo. They did not use cottonization. They did not use industrial machinery. They used the traditional hand processing method refined over 800 years, cutting the stalks in October, retting them in cold mountain streams for 3 weeks, beating the fiber with wooden mallets, combing it by hand, and spinning it on drop spindles. The fabric was extraordinary, soft as linen, strong as canvas, with a natural shimmer that resembled raw silk. For 3,000 years, nettle clothed the poor, the soldiers, the farmers, the people who could not afford silk or fine linen. It was never prestigious. It was never expensive. It was the fabric of necessity. And that is exactly why it was forgotten. Cotton became cheap enough that necessity no longer mattered, and once necessity no longer mattered, knowledge died. But necessity is returning. Water is running out, soil is depleting, pesticides are failing, and the plants that need none of these things, plants like nettle that grow in ditches and enrich the soil and defend themselves, are waiting. The knowledge is not lost, it is dormant, and you just woke it up. If this opens something for you, subscribe.